We are live, right, Natasha?
Yes, we are. So you can see the attendees are joining right now.
Yes. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for the patience. We had a little bit of a technical glitch because of which we're starting a little late. Having said that, wish you all a very happy and prosperous new year. This is our first YMN for this calendar year. And so I just lay out what the idea is today and how we're going to conduct this session. So first up, we have with us today Mr. Kunal Sangoi. He manages three of our funds, roughly about $1.5 billion under management. And we could today going to talk as the invite had suggested about Digital India, Aditya Birla Sun Life Digital India Fund, and Aditya Birla Pure Value Fund. So I think without much ado, what I'll do is Kunal, maybe you could just set the context with what is our outlook briefly, and then maybe we'll start with Digital India Fund and subsequently followed by Pure Value Fund. So over to you, Kunal.
Sure. Thanks, Joseph. Good evening to everyone who's present on the call. Happy New Year and thanks for joining. So I'll start with two of the funds that I manage. I think we're going to discuss Digital India and Pure Value. So what I'll do is that I have a small presentation. Probably many of you would have heard me in September 23, where I had presented Pure Value as well as Digital India. But just to have a quick recall. I will start a small presentation which just briefs about the fund. What do we think in terms of trend for the say Digital India, and how the fund is positioned at this point in time. Yeah, I hope we can see the presentation. Yeah. Okay. So, Digital India Fund, as every one of you must be knowing that, we are investing essentially in the technology-oriented companies. There is an element of, media also here and telecom also. So TMT as a sector, and then we have international tech where we do investments. What is happening over the last, say, in technology space, let us look at, slightly taking a step back. Post-COVID, we've seen a big transformation and big growth for all the technology companies. That was the year, say, FY20 to FY22. Then come calendar year 22, beginning of calendar year 22, which is like FY23. We saw that, this Russia-Ukraine war started, and we saw a big correction in NASDAQ stocks and NASDAQ as a whole, all the tech sector where the valuations were very high. We saw significant correction, and post that, so calendar 22 was where basically reset of valuations. And then probably even when we entered calendar year 23, what we saw is that there was some amount of at least stabilization. Valuations had stopped correcting. And and then actually what we saw is that the Fed, US Federal Reserve, they started raising rates. And that is the time where actually we saw a significant pressure on the overall tech spends. Having said that, 2023 year was a year where we saw significant uncertainties. One is that, Fed started raising rates, and in March 2023, we saw some of the regional banks in the US saw bankruptcy, be it a First Republic or a Silicon Valley Bank. And that's where the overall tech spending started seeing the pressures, and some amount of discretionary spend started reversing. So it went down. Second is that through the whole year, we had, everyone was waiting in the US for a recession, which never came through. But there were concerns that, US is entering a recession. And hence, there were, again, caution all across. Number three is that Fed's increase in the rates were continuous. They had always maintained a stance that higher for longer, and hence what happens is that there was a lot of uncertainty that in terms of the economic data, in terms of the inflation data, how it will pan out, and the uncertainty was there. Then, this Israel and Hamas war happened. I think all of this led to uncertainty in the overall environment, macro environment, and whenever in the past, I've looked at this sector for almost like 2 decades, and that's the time. During that time, what I've seen is that whenever there is an uncertainty in the macro environment, clients generally tend to come back to the shell, and then in terms of decision making, it basically stalls. In an uncertain environment, the tech spending tends to get impacted. And that is exactly what we saw. And hence, whole of the discretionary spending. So, what we saw from February 2023 till say November 2023 was companies in India revise their guidance downwards. And because of discretionary spending overall coming under pressure. So that is the environment, that is a backdrop. Now, what we are seeing are, few fundamental arguments, points. We have seen that, technology, while discretionary was cut, what happened is that there were a lot of cost takeout related deals which came through. So visibility wise or the revenue wise, revenues continue to grow. We did not see any decline in revenues on the Indian IT, just that the expectations were high. Expectations had to get reset downwards. I think fundamental aspects of tech business, if you see, or IT services businesses in India, you've seen is that technology spending are more resilient ever and ever and ongoing basis. For the past 15 years, we've seen that every year Indian IT industry has grown, and that is despite some of the global IT companies actually declining. So Indian IT, one is that have always gained market share, and they have continued to see positive growth at a overall sector level. Second is that Indian IT companies have a fantastic ability to navigate through various technology transformations. So, we've seen, waves of disruption coming through during Y2K era, during, ERP era, which was in 2003, 2004. Then we had GFC crisis in 2008. Then we had COVID crisis in 2020. After every disruption, big disruption, we Indian IT services have only been able to add to the market share. And that is where, there is a big resilience, which is already seen. And in terms of the capability wise, so any technology, new technology, basically there is a learning period. There are majority of the companies who adopt to that, new technologies, and basically are able to gain deals through on the new technology, be it a ERP wave which came through, or be it a infrastructure management wave, or erstwhile in 2000 it was more of maintenance waves, so it was more of application maintenance. Then came application development, then came core banking, then came in 2015-16 it came digital services, and then since 2018-19 there is a cloud related transformation. So point number one, technology spending by clients is very, very resilient. Second, Indian IT companies have been able to gain market share through various disruptions, be it in terms of technology or be it in terms of economic disruption. Third is that when we look at post-COVID, I think the world has moved a lot more digital, and hence each of the verticals are spending far more in technology and in far more in terms of the overall digital transformation, and hence the growth rate post-COVID for Indian IT companies is going to be higher. If you were to look at on a 3-year rolling CAGR basis, it will be higher than the pre-COVID levels, and hence from an opportunity or addressable market perspective, I think that expands the market. Fourth is that there is a disruption in terms of, we've been hearing about artificial intelligence far more, chat GPT. So generative AI is something that last year was a lot more talked about. However, this year, going into 2024, you're going to see a lot more companies and boardroom level discussions on generative AI, which is leading to some amount of pilot projects and actual projects coming through on Gen AI basis. A lot of companies in Indian IT sector, they have been able to train their resources, manpower on Gen AI, and are already working on pilot projects. So I think There'll be small projects for few of the companies. For some of the companies, they are starting to see some positive impact on Gen AI. So it is not going to be a big revenue driver, but certainly I think that is going to drive some amount of incremental revenues. If you were to look at now, what has changed, say last year and this year, say last September and post that right now. So I think one of the key things that has changed is with regards to the stance of the Fed on the interest rates. They have said that 2024, probably second half, you may see rate cuts also. Now, what does it mean for the sector? Now, rate cuts would mean that the one is that inflation is under control. Second is that from a IT spending perspective, that certainty will basically lead to banking sector, which has been big under pressure in terms of the overall technology spending. You will see that starting to see some amount of incremental spending coming through. Retail sector. So banking, retail, high tech, those are the sectors who spend big on technology. I think with change in Fed's rate related stance, I think that brings some amount of optimism that potentially in say second half of 2024, you will start seeing discretionary spends coming back. I think that is another trend. Plus some of our channel checks where we look at where basically we track a lot of hyperscalers like cloud companies like Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, plus some of the software as a service SaaS companies in the US. So whatever trends we are picking up from there, it tells us that directionally you are going to see positivity, or directionally we are going to see positive spending environment. And I think that is something that makes us also incrementally positive. So in September, I had said that from an investment perspective, you should look at definitely look at investing over the next 6 to 8 months. I think that is starting to vindicate already, and probably going in through the year, you will see a lot more. If you look at the Gartner forecast, which comes every Gartner is a global research agency which basically publishes the tech spending forecast and surveys. They say that this year the tech spending is going, IT services spend is going to grow by almost 9% this year. Now, what that means and what in the past, Indian IT has always been able to grow 4 to 5% higher than what the Gartner's overall, this is the global IT services spend. So offshore guys like India, you see market share gains and the growth being higher. So I think, all of this is the trend from a sectoral perspective, and which makes us, more optimistic on the technology sector for this year. If you look at, from a digital, what are the other trends? Is that discretionary was withdrawn in terms of spending last year. But what we are seeing, say in September, last year, September quarter results or December quarter results, which are being disclosed right now, is that from a deal win perspective, there are a lot of large deals, which are also cost takeout related deals. So what happens? Indian IT benefits in two ways, in an economic upturn as well as in economic downturn. In an economic upturn, basically because of discretionary spends being higher, Indian IT participates in the discretionary spends. When a downturn comes, every corporate looks towards cutting costs. And when you talk about cutting costs, basically when you shift your tech spends from in-house to offshore locations like Bangalore or Pune or Chennai, basically you're cutting costs and say moving it to low cost locations. So you either gain in a upturn on a discretionary environment, you gain on a downturn with a large deal wins and cost takeout related deals. I think that is what we've seen, that cost takeout deals has provided that visibility of growth. At least the growth has not dropped off, or it's not a decline. You're seeing that growth. Second is that if you look at the digitization journey that started post-COVID, the cloud migration. So only as of now, if you were to see, only 40% of the workloads have moved to cloud. And of this, only 20% are modernized. So there is a lot of work to be done already. Any transformation journey is a 3 to 4 year journey. Probably we are midway in that journey. And hence, there is good amount of work which is going to be done by the Indian IT guys for the global clients. Only 1/3 of the clients have modernized their ERP, and only 10% are actually 10% of the clients are mature in terms of the overall data and AI space. So as the environment improves, the uncertainty goes, you will see this digitization acceleration on the digitization journey. I think that is a positive trend. AI spend, I already talked about it. Generally, Gartner forecast that it's almost a $9 billion opportunity, which over the next 5 years, it's going to increase to almost like a $43 billion. And the fourth point is with regards to the stance by the Fed rate, by the Federal Reserve, which I already talked about. Some of the read through from hyperscalers is that if you look at last year until June, we saw a global companies actually who guide for full year revenue forecast to their investors. They were reducing their guidance, but probably from the July till December, when we look at most of these SaaS companies, we've seen that they have increased their guidance, which is telling us that there is optimism in terms of spend. Plus, a lot of tech spends probably you can hold back, but you cannot cut, because you may hold back because there is the environment is uncertain, and you may want to increase the tech spends when you see the revenue visibility. Then only you add to your cost base. But something that you can postpone, but you cannot cut down, because otherwise your competition is going to go ahead and invest that dollars and probably take some lead and market shares. So if you look at say ServiceNow or Salesforce, Workday, the table in this slide shows that all of them, they increase their guidance in 2023 calendar year and this is essentially coming at the second half of 2023. So I think this is something which also makes us more optimistic that the environment will improve. Companies who have been declaring results so far, tech companies, by and large, they have right now their commentary is muted. There is caution in the environment, plus pressure on the spending. But the view is that companies are usually the lag indicators. They will tell you what they are seeing at this point in time. As fund manager, as analyst, our job is to look at the future, what will happen in the future, and hence we are trying to price what is going to come through in say second half of FY25 or FY26, and hence we position it from now. As far as the fund is concerned, the positioning, where the opportunities are, if you look at overall digital India, I think 72% of the exposure is in the IT services side. 7.5% is on the telecom side, where essentially you've not seen any major price increase, but I think price increase will follow on the telecom side. 5% of the weight is international tech, where basically these are virtual monopolies. So companies like Microsoft or Adobe or Apple, these are the companies that we own. Recently, we also added Cognizant to it because we're positive on the environment, and Cognizant has seen a change in the CEO, and there are initiatives there around. The fourth is the domestic technology-oriented companies, where basically I had last time spoken about some of this exposure, which was like 3%, probably that has gone up to 7%. We added be it a RateGain or a Zomato or a Paytm or a Policy Bazaar, which was part of the portfolio. We booked full profits there. Then small exposure on the services side in terms of CMS and CMS Info, which is the cash management services, and media, which is the least exposure, 1.5% around, which had included Z. Yeah. So these, if you look at the fund in terms of our performance, I'm sure all of us are aware about it. But 67% of the portfolio as of now is like large cap. 18% is small cap and 11% is mid cap. Some of our stock picking in the small cap, mid cap have really worked very well, and utilizing the weight from large cap, putting into small cap and mid cap, which has given us very good returns. And the chart on the right hand side shows that over a long period of time, it's not just 1 year versus benchmark. So benchmark on a 1 year basis has given 21% return, but so this is 1 year ending 31st December 23. Benchmark is 21%. The fund has delivered almost 37% return. And as can be seen over a longer period of time, over a longer period of time. So it has been one of the most consistent fund on a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, pick any period, and you will see that fund versus benchmark has done well. And the yellow bar is actually the peer average, where it includes the other funds in the market, where at any point in time, I think on a rolling 3-year basis, we have continued to deliver consistent performance there. What worked for the fund in terms of stocks, etc. So if you look at on the left side, NetWeb Technologies, Birla Soft, Sonata Software, Persistent Systems, Cyient, Coforge, KPIT, all of these have done very well, contributed big to the return, to the overall fund returns. And on the right hand side is something that we don't own, and hence it has contributed versus the benchmark. So we don't own PVR, Sterlite, Tejas, and hence that is all contributed positive alpha to the fund. These are some of the drags what didn't work for the fund, which we had in the fund and actually has gone down. So be it Paytm or not. So this is a 3-month return, but Paytm, as you would know, we had doubled our exposure at below 500 levels and sold those exposures at 900. But still, on a 3-year basis, 3-month basis, the stock is down. India Mart is something that is slightly down. It's a recent addition. Cyient, DLM, Z, of course, everyone knows about the Z and Sony deal, and which has got impacted. CMS Info, Tata Com on a 3-month basis. And on the right hand side, we have some of those exposures which did not have, and stocks have done well. But on a net basis, if you see, of course, all of that has contributed to this last 1 year, collectively 1 year performance. This is the portfolio parameter in terms of how the fund is positioned, what is the P of the fund. I think we look at a lot more individual stocks than at a fund, but I think for people who are interested in this aggregate data, I think this is where it is. We are at a ROE of almost 26% and EPS growth of 19%, in FY24 EPS growth of 12%. So I think I am done with the Digital India. So Joseph, you can tell me if you want to first take questions on Digital India, then I can start my thoughts on the pure value fund.
Sure. So I think what we'll do is maybe there are certain questions that I had for the fund. I'll ask you.
Sure.
We'll keep the Q&A for maybe end. If there are certain questions which participants have and they want to put it in the chat, I think we'll be glad to respond to that. I just wanted to also understand, Kunal, in terms of overall, the result season is upon us. And how has been generally the results for the companies in IT enabled services? What happens is, if there is one or two of those companies which have, as you said, muted expectation, तो थोड़ा ऐसा हो जाता है कि मानसिक तौर पे लोगों को लगता है कि अच्छा इट इज नॉट परफॉर्मिंग वेल, दे आर कंजर्वेटिव, इस फंड में हमें पैसा डालना चाहिए कि नहीं. तो maybe from that standpoint, if you could just throw light on this quarter's result.
Okay, so this quarter's results so far, it has been mixed, and by and large, we haven't seen any big surprises. Two things, a lot is expected. See, December quarter has lesser number of billing days for the sector. So because of furloughs in December, plus there are plant shutdowns, which are planned shutdowns of the plants by the clients, and hence you have part of the employees who are not billed during that period. So it is usually a seasonally weak quarter for the Indian IT companies, which was the case. And expectation was that March quarter you will see some amount of growth actually coming back, which I think as of now companies are saying it is not necessarily that strong. So visibility wise and growth wise, I think FY24 is one of the weaker years. Now our thesis is that this weakness probably be it in March or in June, but by come September quarter, this September 2024 quarter come, and you will start seeing companies actually talking more positive, assuming that there is no major deterioration in the macro environment, which I think should be the case, because in the US there is no data which is suggesting that there is a there is a stress in any of the verticals or any of the sectors in the US. If there was a stress is where you would potentially see that, there could be some collapse or big cuts in the IT spending, which is not likely. And hence, I would think that, by September quarter, I think companies will start talking positive. Now, market always factors that 6 months ahead. And, you will see that, during April, when companies talk about the full year of FY25, you may see some disappointment and, possibly some correction. I think through that period, so from now till through that period till June, one has to accumulate the sector because CY25, which is FY26, fiscal 26, and next year, next calendar year, I think IT spending will return in a big way. A lot of discretionary projects will come through, and you will actually see companies talking positive. But when companies are talking positive about it, you will see the stock prices much ahead of it, right? So stocks will always factor. So I think this is the time where over the next 6 months, one should continue to accumulate. We had given that call that last year, June onwards, you should be beginning to, add to the exposure to digital India. And I think that has worked very well. Because even if you look at, there was a lot of uncertainty in calendar year 23, still we saw that IT sector actually outperformed Nifty, right? So I don't see any reason that, through this period, if you continue to invest, you'll see that disappointment. See, disappointments will come through. We as fund managers will use those disappointments to add to exposures to good companies. So what happened, and probably when I come to Pure Value, I will talk about it. So one of the top holdings in Pure Value, now the top holding in Pure Value is Infosys, which is almost like a 4.5-5% exposure. Through the whole of last calendar year, we built that position over a period of time. And that is what we've seen, that in January quarter, when Infosys actually reported more or less in line with street expectations, slightly better on the margins. TCS talked positive about that, banking sector growth is bottomed out and you will see growth. We saw Infosys actually moving up almost like a 8-10%, right, on the result day. And then since then, in last 3 months itself, Infosys is up 21%. And that is something that we built at much good levels through last year when the disappointments came through. Yeah.
Sure. So thanks for that. I think Kunal, बहुत अच्छे से आपने बताया कि how you going to manage maybe a little bit of muted expectation on results per se. एक दूसरा क्वेश्चन था, आई थिंक लास्ट ईयर हमने देखा, एज यू सेड एंड एवरीबडी नोज कि स्मॉल कैप एंड मिड कैप सेक्टर्स हैव रन अ लॉट, right? So is there any amount of change that you would be looking at in terms of allocation within the fund in small and mid cap? And secondly, from a service point of view, we also wanted to understand, is it also, some of these small and mid cap offerings are very different than, large cap companies, so that, they still stay as a part of the portfolio?
So I'll tell you what is happening is that when you look at the sector, we talk about IT as a sector, but I think we have to dissect the specializations. If you look at, say, Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL, those are full services providers, wide across horizontals, multiple capabilities, and addressing all the verticals. Some of the mid caps and small caps, of course, they being small, they specialize in a few verticals, specialize in a few capabilities, horizontals, as we say. So one has to look at what are the trends in those individual verticals. If the growth opportunity in those verticals or the sector is in tailwind, I think you will continue to see that, those mid caps actually doing well, those small caps doing well.
Okay.
A case in point being, when we had added KPIT Technologies, so that was a time where actually, no one was talking about auto engineering. And from there, we have seen overall, with the proliferation of, as in more and more EV models coming through, more and more R&D dollars being spent by a lot of global OEMs into auto, as every car is becoming more and more electronic. There is more electronic features in the car, more software features in the car,
Right.
embedded systems embedded in the softwares which are embedded in the car. Because every new model launch has more and more features, which has more softwareization, which has more embedded systems into it. And this is the company which was totally focused only on auto sector. And we've seen, the kind of growth that they reported in the last 2 years. And still, there is a good amount of opportunity. So we continue to hold on to that exposure, which has been more than 10x for us. We continue to hold. Similarly, in the, say, ER&D space, so engineering, research and development space, not just automotive, but it could be aerospace engineering, it could be plant engineering, it could be more industrial engineering, healthcare side focus. ER&D as a space is a big opportunity. There is a big headroom of growth, big long growth opportunity, because that is a relatively underpenetrated, say, versus a IT services. So I think, companies which are present in those areas where we have exposure, also good exposures we have, I don't see, despite the valuations getting re-rated, I don't see reason to shift unless the valuations are going, very, which are factoring in, say, 5 years of growth also. So to that extent, we continue to monitor as and when, during any updates on the companies or results on the company, and we trim our exposures accordingly if the valuations go, much beyond our fair value. So
I think in the group there is a question that the overall IT which we are there, it's about 67%. तो ये maintain रखेंगे या are we going to look at tinkering with this allocation as well?
सो ये डायनामिक रहेगा. अपॉर्चुनिटी अगर मिलता है ऐसे इन इंटरनेशनल टेक्नोलॉजी, सो इंटरनेशनल टेक्नोलॉजी में एक्सपोजर था 5%. अभी 5% है वो, बिकॉज ऑफ डोमेस्टिक टेक्नोलॉजी बढ़ के वो कम हो गया था, 3-3.5% हो गया था, तो हमने वो और बढ़ाया. प्लस मतलब वो उसमें आरबीआई का कैप भी है, जिसकी वजह से हम बढ़ा नहीं पाए थे. बट इंटरनेशनल टेक भी बढ़ा है, और प्लस इवन डोमेस्टिक टेक्नोलॉजी. सो से सपोज जब भी पेटीएम भी 500 के नीचे था, तो हमने काफी अच्छा अपॉर्चुनिटी था और हमने वो डबल कर दिया था एक्सपोजर. Similarly, Zomato, which was one of the very early picks, and we've been holding since IPO. We added at lower levels at 60 rupees, 65 rupees, 80 rupees. That we continue to so wherever जहाँ पे भी stock, I look at individual stocks as individual opportunities. जहाँ पे अपना from the point of buying, we should be able to make money. There should be lower downside when I'm buying. I think that is a basic philosophy that I follow. So जहाँ पे लग रहा है कि valuations are gone on an extreme, maybe some amount of satellite position जैसा होता है कि वो थोड़ा weight trim कर दिया, profits book कर दिया. Because इन स्मॉल एंड मिड कैप्स में व्हाट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इज दैट कि अगर आप प्रॉफिट बुक नहीं करोगे, तो देन अगर क्वार्टर खराब आता है, रिजल्ट खराब आता है, कभी कोई क्लाइंट का इम्पैक्ट आ जाता है, तो द ड्रॉडाउन दैट यू सी इन सम ऑफ दोस स्मॉल कैप्स एंड मिड कैप्स आर फार शार्पर. सो विच इज व्हाई ऑल्सो बुक प्रॉफिट एंड रियलाइज दोस गेन्स.
So I think थोड़ा आपने ये फॉरेन स्टॉक्स के बारे में बात किया, बट द क्वेश्चन इज आल्सो अराउंड कि अगर रेट कट होता है यूएस में एज एक्सपेक्टेड, मे बी नॉट इमीडिएटली बट थोड़े बाद में होता है, तो ए व्हाट इज द इम्पैक्ट, एंड बी अगर कुछ एक्सपोजर अगेन वुड यू बी इंक्रीजिंग मोर फॉरेन एक्सपोजर?
फॉरेन एक्सपोजर, यस, वी वुड लाइक टू इंक्रीज, बट जो आरबीआई का कैप है म्यूचुअल फंड लेवल पे कि हम ज्यादा बाय नहीं कर सकते, तो वो लीवे नहीं है अभी हमारे पास. जितना लीव मतलब बहुत कम लीवे था, तो जितना लीवे था उतना हमने यूटिलाइज किया है. अभी जब भी वो लीवे खुलेगा, तब हम ज्यादा बाय कर सकते हैं. प्लस अपॉर्चुनिटी अच्छा आना चाहिए. तो जो लास्ट हमने लिया था, से सपोज कॉग्निजेंट लिया था, उसके पहले हमने अडोबी लिया था. अडोबी इज द सेम कंपनी दैट जो फोटोशॉप, अडोब फोटोशॉप, अपन पीडीएफ जो खोलते हैं, अडोब पीडीएफ रीडर. सो आई थिंक दे आर डूइंग वेरी वेल. सो वो हमने लिया था, लास्ट ईयर लिया था फरवरी में. तो उसके बाद कॉग्निजेंट ही लिया है, तो उसके बाद एक्सपोजर बढ़ाया नहीं है, बट अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है. अवर इंटेंट इज के हम ये एक्सपोजर इंटरनेशनल टेक्नोलॉजी का 10 से 12% के रेंज में करना चाहते हैं, बट वो आरबीआई के कैप के वजह से नहीं कर पा रहे अभी।
So there is a question, are you looking to increase allocation in AI space? And so yeah, I think that's one question post which maybe we can move to pure value.
Okay. So AI space में yes, there is a opportunity to play the AI also, but कैसा है कि right now in AI you don't have a company which is listed separately. So
Mhm.
जो companies like some of the companies like say Persistent or a company Infosys who has TCS, they have expertise in house. तो उसके अंदर small teams है जो जनरेटिव एआई पे काम कर रहे हैं, प्रोजेक्ट्स कर रहे हैं। परसिस्टेंट है, एलटीआई है, एलटीआई माइंट्री है, कोफोज है, वो सब कंपनीज काम करते हैं वो एरिया में। सोनाटा सॉफ्टवेयर है या बिरला सॉफ्ट है। बट those are like AI is one of the portion of the big overall business. AI is very small, तो आपको AI का थीम खेलने के लिए सेपरेटली कोई कंपनी रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है। आई थिंक you will see various names floating around on WhatsApp groups that AI खेलना है तो ये कंपनीज आप ये थीम ले लो। I would say I would raise a word of caution there. You should not be doing that because there is no company which is like totally AI focused. For playing a AI theme, one of the companies, indirect companies also, as in international wise, you can always look at some of the companies which are chip companies, which are say a company like a Nvidia or TSMC or Qualcomm. But specifically in India, you do not have a direct AI play. Yes.
So thanks, Kunal, on in this update on Digital India. I think we can move on to Pure Value Fund. And as you had mentioned, आपने कुछ presentation बनाया है. Maybe you can run through, and then we will have a set of questions from the participants who have logged in, as well as I have certain questions for you.
Sure. Can we see this?
Yes, it's visible. You can.
Okay. So pure value may I will just take you through the brief philosophy that we have in terms of following. We are purely looking at bottom-up strategy in terms of identifying a strong and which has a which has a strong fundamental. But basically वैल्यू कॉन्सेप्ट क्या है? वैल्यू कॉन्सेप्ट वो है कि आप वो कंपनी खरीद रहे हो जिसकी वैल्यू एक्चुअली ज्यादा है मार्केट प्राइस से। वो बेसिक फिलोसफी है। बट हमारा जो ब्रॉडर मतलब ये आई एम जोसेफ, इज इट ओके इफ आई कम्युनिकेट इन हिंदी, राइट? यू वांट
Yes,
टू
absolutely
पार्टिसिपेट?
fine. But I think जो screen है वो अभी भी डिजिटल वाले ही फंड का दिख रहा है मुझे. So
ओके, लेट मी।
या एक बार ट्राई कर लीजिए आप. I think. Yes, and इसको full screen कर दें. I think that will help.
Yeah, I've already done that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can see it. Okay. So जो ट्रेडिशनल, तो इसमें वो देखना है कि हम कंपनी का इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू शुड बी हायर देन द मार्केट प्राइस। दैट इज अ सिंपल डेफिनेशन। नाउ वो इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू डिफाइन करने के लिए देयर आर मल्टीपल वेज वेयर बेसिकली यू लुक एट मल्टीपल पैरामीटर्स एंड यू ascribe a value to it and the market price should be lower. So that is a basic philosophy. That is what we adopt in terms of identifying stocks which are value oriented. Second is that हम वो देखते हैं कि इसमें रिलेटिव वैल्यू देखते हैं। जो एक ट्रेडिशनल पुराना डेफिनेशन था पहले से कि जो स्टॉक लो प्राइस टू अर्निंग्स पे ट्रेड होता है, जो लो प्राइस टू सेल्स पे ट्रेड होता है, जिसका डिविडेंड यील्ड ज्यादा हो, जिसका फ्री कैश फ्लो यील्ड ज्यादा हो, I think in my view, that is while it is value, but it can lead to value trap, and which is what we want to avoid. कि value ही रहता है for multiple years. Now, how do you know that value is going to get realized? And I think that is where we think that कि वो वैल्यू ट्रैप में नहीं जाना है। हमें वैल्यू वो ट्रेडिशनल डेफिनेशन से नहीं देखना है। हमें वो देखना है कि वेर एवर बेसिकली इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू। सेकंड इज दैट वेर यू लुक एट रिलेटिव वैल्यू। तो काफी सारे जो पुराने डेफिनेशन के वो फिर आपको ओल्ड इकोनॉमी सेक्टर, पीएसयू स्टॉक्स, अभी तो पीएसयू थीम चालू है, बट इन जनरल इफ यू सी दीज पीएसयूज डिड नथिंग फॉर multi-years, many years, it did not do anything. And now over the last, say, 1 year, 1.5 year, you're seeing a lot of movement in the PSU stock. So it looks good right now, and which I think, it's a great value, which we have played also. But when you look at relative value, what happens is that as an investor, you are able to participate in value as well as growth. So काफी सारे growth sectors जो होते हैं, उसमें because वो expensive valuations पे trade होते हैं, ट्रेडिशनल डेफिनेशन से जाए तो वो कभी हम ले नहीं पाएंगे. अगर हमें रिलेटिव वैल्यू देख रहे हैं तो उसमें देखते हैं कि से सपोज ऑटो सेक्टर है, तो ऑटो सेक्टर में यू लुक एट टाटा मोटर्स, महिंद्रा एंड महिंद्रा, मारुति और टीवीएस और बजाज और हीरो. अभी उसमें इफ यू लुक एट सम से फोर व्हीलर कंपनीज, so फोर व्हीलर कंपनीज या बीट इवन अ कमर्शियल व्हीकल कंपनी अशोक लेलैंड एंड एवरीथिंग, wherever there is within the sector some stock which is trading cheap and has a good business potential, I think we would also look at कि भले वो वर्सेस मार्केट एक्सपेंसिव हो बट विद इन द सेक्टर अगर चीप है, I think that will form part of our relative value, and I think that is a big differentiation versus some of the ways, some of the ways in which competition runs the fund. Relative value approach, it helps you participate in a growth sector also, where the industry is growing, where the company is growing, the sector is growing, and the earnings growth potential is good, and it helps you to, most important thing, avoid value traps. So we have a 50% weighted to value, 50% weighted to relative value. That is how we look at. Second is that when you look at purely value stocks, which are low expensive, I think it is important to see the industry dynamics, and second is that the company dynamics. What is changing? Is there some inflection that is happening? कि वो जो neglected category है वहां से वो admired category में जाएगा कंपनी, तो वो admired मतलब then that value unlock होता है. तो वो अनलॉक वाला जो स्टेज होता है, एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम वी ट्राई टू लुक एट इट इफ द इंडस्ट्री इज चेंजिंग और द बिजनेस इज चेंजिंग, कंपनी बिजनेस इज चेंजिंग, तो वी लुक एट दैट फॉर्म्स पार्ट ऑफ द वैल्यू इन आवर स्क्रीन, एंड देन वी वुड लुक एट बाइंग दैट अवे. सो एंड प्रॉबली क्या होता है कि दैट इज वेयर मार्केट रियलाइजेस कि ओ दिस इज अ वैल्यू स्टॉक, गुड वैल्यू, ग्रोथ भी आ रहा है अभी इसमें. हमने देखा है Power Finance, REC, Rural Electric Corporation, PFC, REC. These are the names which are talked about because they have done fantastic, right? तो क्या हुआ इतने सालों से, तो वो they were trading at so low multiple, so low book price to book value, right? So हमने भी वो जब भी देखा कि पावर सेक्टर में in terms of lending book clean up हो गया है, in terms of lending SEB related pain has got over. हमने ₹125 में पावर फाइनेंस लिया था तभी, जो अभी भी है फंड में, थोड़ा काफी सारा प्रॉफिट बुक कर दिया है उसमें, बट that is there was an inflection at that point in time, and suddenly you started seeing that value getting realized, and which is why we've seen that unlocking of the value, and then value from neglected category it became admired. सब मार्केट पार्टिसिपेंट को पता है कि पावर फाइनेंस आया, आरईसी अच्छा है, ग्रोथ आएगा, एवरीथिंग, एंड विच इज व्हाई those gone to trade at beyond one price to book multiples also. So when they get drifted away from those neglected to admired category, or so that is the time when we start also booking profits. So that is the style in which we look at managing. In terms of the framework, what is important is that कि एक framework में काम करें तो क्या है, आपका discipline रहेगा. We look at 50% large cap. So ये multi cap approach है. इसमें according to SID there is no market cap restrictions, but हमारे internal framework में हमने ऐसा बोला 50% large cap रखेंगे, 50% mid and small cap, and depending on whatever the market outlook is, कि अगर overall market में बहुत positive लग रहा है तो then that मिड कैप स्मॉल कैप एक्सपोजर जो 50% है उसको हम +10% करके 60% पे लेके जाएंगे, बिकॉज in a in a bullish market scenario you will see that mid cap small caps doing well, and hence वो रिटर्न में पार्टिसिपेट करना है तो वो हम 60% तक लेके जाएंगे. अगर मार्केट बेरिश लग रहा है, खराब लग रहा है, तो हम वो मिड कैप स्मॉल कैप का एक्सपोजर फ्रॉम 50% नीचे लेके आएंगे, मतलब 60 से पहले नीचे, और देन आई कैन गो टू 40-60, मतलब +10 -10% दैट लीव. एंड वैल्यूएशन वाइज आई टोल्ड यू कि भाई सिर्फ लो प्राइस टू अर्निंग्स, लो प्राइस टू बुक, हाई डिविडेंड डील वो देख के नहीं लेना है, हमें रिलेटिव वैल्यू भी देखना है, एंड इंडस्ट्री और कंपनी का ग्रोथ प्रोस्पेक्ट देख के so I think that framework is what I stick to, and which is what I think has given us good leeway in terms of so one is a discipline which is followed, and it also has some leeway. Same thing, three main investment styles होता है, मतलब एक value style होता है, the chart that you see on the right hand side where it is basically a value, there is a growth style, and then there is a pure quality style. What we are trying to do here is that value में with a relative value, you participate in some of the growth stocks also and some of the quality stock also. So there is a intersection between value and growth in a way, right? When you look at relative value. Usually value and growth, they tend to do well in a recovery cycle, recovery phase, which is what the current market cycle is. So three things. Relative value, जिससे value trap avoid होता है, good blend of large, mid and small है, तो 50% large cap, 50% mid and small cap in a way, and participation of growth within value. So those are the three things. In terms of the fund positioning, if you look at financial services is almost like 19% exposure. We look at overall this portfolio versus we look at this versus the NSE 500. If you look at if you look at from a sectoral exposure perspective, we are at 19% on financial services. This doesn't include the PSU banks, which is another 6%, which was 9% when I spoke to you in, say, in September 2023. We were very early in terms of many of the PSU banks. We played that rally. Financial services also, I think, some of the calls have been worked really well in our favor. Be it, Axis Bank, the shift from HDFC Bank into Axis Bank, full of that. I think that has worked really well. ICICI Bank, Poonawalla Finance, Power Finance, as I mentioned earlier, LIC Housing, Manappuram Finance. I think, some of these where basically we've seen, by and large, NIM expansion, good credit growth, and, low NPAs. I think, overall had driven and good re-rating had happened. Second big weight was within the capital goods, and then capital goods sector, where basically again we had Welspun Corporation, Carborundum, Kalpataru. I think there is a good visibility of overall capex. Individual companies where revenues and earnings growth and valuations were fairly attractive when we entered. Probably they may not be so attractive at this point in time because stocks have done like 3x and 3x or so. Be it a Kalpataru which is a 2x, Welspun is a 3x for us. Within auto components, which is a 7% weight, again, EV transition has been beneficial for many of the auto ancillary companies. And we played auto ancillary part very well in this fund. We continue to have good exposure there. Minda Corporation, Precall, Craftsman, Ramkrishna Forgings, which is one of the top holdings, where we have been also booking profits at the right juncture. So those did well. Within IT, as I told earlier, Infosys is the top holding of the fund itself. And this has been built from almost 1230 levels when it corrected big time in April last year. So from there, we have, continued to add exposure to Infosys in the last full calendar year. So you can see that what kind of return it has already given. Birlasoft, which was one of the very good, again, picks, HCL Tech, Birlasoft, we added below 300, from 250 to 300 kind of levels. And, we are seeing that stock आज 800 पे है. वहाँ पे भी, we have seen profit booking there. From our side, we've reduced some weightages. HCL Tech was a good bet again. Persistent Systems, I think हमने अभी full profit book कर दिए है उसमें. Some of the PSU banks, again, I spoke about. So Punjab National Bank, Bank of India, Union Bank, those have been like given fantastic returns for us. Right now, the exposure is about 6%. जो 9% था, तो हमने profit book वहाँ पे भी किए हैं कुछ banks में, because they have given like more than 50% return. So जहाँ पे भी fair value लग रहा है कि थोड़ा closer आ रहा है या fair value से ऊपर जा रहा है, I think we have tactically also reduced. Not that we've made it zero, because पता नहीं है कितना और ऊपर जाएगा, तो still to participate, we continue to have that exposure. if you look at last 1.5 years, so I took over managing this fund from October 2022. And on a 1 year basis, if you see, I think versus index as well as this, been fortunate that, whatever stocks we had from, earlier, plus, all the changes that we've made over the last, say, 1 year, over the last, say, around 15 months, probably those changes have worked well. Plus some of the stocks we held on, which had good value and good outlook. I think those have seen a good realization of value. So that have been able to see a turnaround, that have been able to actually contribute to the turnaround that we've seen in the fund in the last, say, 4 or 15 months. So 1 year basis, if you look at performance wise, I think calendar 23 was one of the very good years where we delivered almost 45%, 44% return versus, peer average of 35% and, benchmark return of 26%. So good alpha in the last 1 year and 2 year. 3 year, 5 year, of course, we have seen that performance being equal or slight equal or lower, because अगर आप सबको पता होगा जो और investors है pure value के, they face challenge, I think, for post 2018 time frame. And the changes that we've done, I think we are working towards that change, trying to maintain a good discipline in terms of the framework that I highlighted earlier. And looking at stocks where we can just make good upsides with a lower downside. I think that is the mantra that I continue with, and which has been able to deliver this return. Now, what worked, as I to earlier highlighted, power finance, जो अभी हमने काफी profit book कर दिया है, but power finance was one big last 1 year basis. Power finance है, Neyveli Lignite, NLC, Ramkrishna Forgings, which is one of the big contributors, Welspun Corporation, Birla Soft, Cyient, Shobha, Chalet Hotels, DLF, Strides. I think, owning all these have helped us very much. These are the top 10 contributors, at least in terms of, stocks that we owned and did well. If you look at, again, the left table, these are the stocks that we have in the Orient Cement, Tata Motors. Tata Motors, I think, is a good story. We added at, in some of the other, from the time I started managing, I think, looked at, Tata Motors. I thought that, stock, because I was positive on Tata Motors since a long period of time, but, stock had already seen that journey towards, say, 600 rupees, 625. ऐसा लग रहा था कि from here what's the upside, but I think still when you look at relative basis there was good amount of value, and we took that plunge to say that this, from even money can be made, almost 25% kind of a return can be made. Well, that was the assumption when we actually entered and we built that position. So Tata Motors, MCX, HPCL, NTPC, also again, at 170, 180 levels, again added a lot more. So that has been a good pick again. All these are collectively. So there have been congruence of multiple stocks which have, contributed to all this return. Minda Corporation, all of this contributed. What didn't work for us probably were stocks which we held, like some of these 5 stocks where we had Aditya Birla, ABFRL, where actually, but where we had stock has not done well so far. Not that it will not do, but we've built that position at below the current prices, where basically I think there is good amount of value there and it can be realized. Honeywell, Balrampur, IG Petro, some of these have been drags to the portfolio. I think net हमें वो देखना है कि हम कम से कम गलती करें, कम से कम ड्रैग हो पोर्टफोलियो में. Even if you do 50% plus good stock calls and all, I think that can give a good alpha. And that is the basic philosophy कि अगर गलत जाते हैं तो कम लॉस होना चाहिए, अगर सही जाते हैं तो ज्यादा प्रॉफिट होना चाहिए. I think that is a basic philosophy with which continue to look at stocks in this fund. This is the portfolio parameters. If you look at from a price earnings perspective, वैल्यू फंड है तो वो पी रेशियो पे भी कम दिखना ही चाहिए, जो हो रहा है एक्चुअली, बिकॉज सम ऑफ द स्टॉक्स आर गुड वैल्यू ओरिएंटेड स्टॉक्स. 20 पी है पोर्टफोलियो FY25 का, जबकि BSE 500 अगर आप देखो तो वो 28 पी है. इन टर्म्स ऑफ अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ एक्चुअली वो ज्यादा है वर्सेस सम ऑफ द BSE 500. सो 20% जैसा अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ है वर्सेस द BSE 500. सो स्टिल ग्रोथ वाइज इट इज पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ सम growth is also there in this portfolio. As I was saying, relative value, तो growth भी है, value भी है वैसे. So with that, I think, I'm completing this, slides. Probably we can do more of Q&A. Participants, अगर आपको भी question है, please feel free to ask so that we can address and make the best utilization of the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kunal. I think काफी अच्छे से समझाया in the last slide जहां आपने छोड़ा. It gives a sense कि the overall thing is not only in value, but there is some growth orientation. Now, very fundamental question कि generally अभी जिस तरह का market है, people tend to look at growth oriented stocks and they add that to their portfolio. If you were to ask somebody to allocate, what percentage would you say that a value orientation is the theme, value style of investing should have in their portfolio?
So I will say that as of now, overall, if you look at the market cycle, still value is doing well. Okay. It is still a recovery phase where we haven't seen. So if you look at the consumer spending is still weak. Okay. Government capex is happening, but if you look at the private sector capex, there is green shoots and there is a recovery still under process. That the private sector capex, maybe we'll see a lot more after the elections, which is slated in during this first half of this year. Post elections is when so recovery in the private capex, recovery in the consumer discretionary. I think all of this is still pending. And meanwhile, we've seen that rates are still continuing to be high. RBI is also not indicated to any cuts in the rates through this calendar year itself. They've said that they will continue to see rate. They do not expect any cuts in the rates. Now, that's a different call, but till that time you will continue to see value stocks overall doing well. So value is something that you should have it in the portfolio. However, as we are saying, we have a blend of growth as well as value. Plus, the other good advantage is that 50% large cap and 50% mid and small cap that I explained, that with that leeway. So I'll tell you, say a month back probably, our mid and large cap exposure had increased to 58%. So consciously हमने बढ़ाया था, but जो 5-6% additional जो हुआ था ना, that is because some of our stocks, mid and small cap stocks, did really, really well, because of which वो exposure भी बढ़ गया. So what we have also consciously done is that in the past, investors have seen that volatility has been very high in pure value fund. कि भाई मार्केट गिरता है तो हम ज्यादा गिरते हैं, मार्केट चलता है तो हम कम चल रहे थे, ऐसा फीडबैक था talking to many of the investors. So I think we want to address that, and is what something we've worked over the last 15 months, and we are addressing that. And you are seeing the result of it. You're already seeing one is the return wise, also one is the draw. So वो exposure हमने अभी कम करके almost 52% तक लेके आए हैं मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप का एक्सपोजर. तो सम ऑफ द लार्ज कैप्स वी एडेड, जैसे कि इन्फोसिस जो पहले 1-1.5% वेट था, उसको हमने 5% तक वेट कर दिया. कभी जब भी अच्छा प्राइस मिल रहा था तभी तो वो ऐड किया. वैसे ही सम ऑफ द अदर large cap stocks we've added, and be it NTPC or ITC or a Larsen or a Sun Pharma, all those defensive, which will also give some good amount of cushion actually in case of market corrections, etc. So I think that is what is a constant endeavor. So उसमें आपको वैल्यू भी मिल रहा है, ग्रोथ मिल रहा है, वो एक मिक्स मिल रहा है, और दूसरा लार्ज कैप, मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप का मिक्स मिल रहा है. So I think that is how you should see that this exposure includes large value but some amount of growth and a good mix of multi-cap exposure.
तो एक क्वेश्चन कुणाल ये भी था कि वैल्यू स्टॉक्स जनरली do well when the interest rates are hiked or stay elevated. और अभी चलिए ठीक है, recent time में थोड़ा सा interest rate के ऊपर हुआ है, but the expectation is कि second half or we will see a rate cycle change. So then you think that growth stocks will then come back to the fore, and hence that is some amount of thought that people have, and how would you like to address that?
Sorry, what growth stocks coming back? as in
So in
terms
the sense that, value over growth में interest rates जब
yeah.
भी
See, so always what happens is that many of the stocks, when you categorize as value या growth, वो actually same stocks नहीं रहते, मतलब वो same stock ही at some point in time value है जो फिर growth में चले जाते हैं when they make returns, right? So वो बिरला सॉफ्ट जब भी हमने खरीदा तभी 260 280 रुपए में, लास्ट ईयर अप्रैल एंड मई टाइम फ्रेम में, तभी वो वैल्यू था। अभी एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम एट 800 रुपया, जब भी वो प्राइस अर्निंग्स उसका 27 टाइम 28 टाइम ऑन अ फॉरवर्ड बेसिस है, तभी वो ग्रोथ बन गया है, बिकॉज उसमें ग्रोथ भी अच्छा आ रहा है अभी, एंड एंड वैल्यूएशंस भी एक्सपेंसिव है। क्वेश्चन इज दैट कि वो हम अभी खरीदेंगे, मतलब one is that we look at one what is the downside, second is that what we look at from a valuation perspective, so वो actually growth वाला value में move हो गया, but question is हमने portfolio में तो रखा ही है जो काफी बुक भले प्रॉफिट बुक किया थोड़ा, but still the company is doing well, so we continue to hold on. So you are already playing that part of the growth already into it. Second example, if I were to take, so is one of the stock which we bought also made 2.5x return also, and we have sold also. If I get name, Gokuldas Exports. Okay, so that is a stock that where it was totally ignored. Textile as a sector was totally ignored. No one was looking at it, and we had an opportunity to participate at a good price. We bought that. The assumption was that over the next 1 year, you will see the sector's worst numbers, and which is why the stock price is already factoring that in. And यहाँ से downside क्या है? So अगर downside आपको 10% ही है, and अगर business improvement होता है, तो upside कितना है? तो वो upside तभी 60-70% दिख रहा था। तो अगर 10% डाउनसाइड में आपको 60-70% वाला अगर अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है, आई थिंक दैट इज अ ब्रिलियंट अपॉर्चुनिटी फॉर me to make money for the unit holders. So, which is what we added that exposure. Now, if you look at, now the stock has got re-rated because company delivered actually better than expected numbers. थोड़ा भी better आता है ना, तो then there is a disproportionate return. So the return was far more disproportionate, and it probably is still in the value category, but on a relative basis, still it becomes now expensive when I compare with some of the other. So question now, point is that it was far beyond the value zone and far beyond the fair value zone also, which is why we sold that off now at say more or less near about current prices. But the fact is, if the outlook continued to be good and valuation slightly lower, I think we would continue to hold that as a growth. So, value and growth का definition, मतलब it's not that only value, but large part because अभी PSU stocks, are doing well. PSU as a theme is doing well. We're seeing that, more value stocks. I think that should continue overall value.
राइट। सो कुणाल, एक तो मैंने ये भी देखा था कि पोर्टफोलियो में थोड़ा, जैसे आपने बताया कि स्मॉल कैप हैज गॉन अप, एंड आई थिंक एंड ऑफ दिसंबर वेयर आई वाज लुकिंग एट, इट्स अबाउट 36% टू द, एंड वेल प्लेड इन दैट सेंस कि स्मॉल कैप स्टॉक की रैली भी कैप्चर्ड एंड देयर वाज इनफ एंड मोर एक्सपोजर. Is there any tapering that you would be looking at going forward, basis valuation and other market phenomena?
Yeah, so I think that has already happened. Small cap and mid cap exposure, no, I think that we have already seen, that already coming off. So if I were to, highlight, as of now, the small and mid cap exposure collectively, is closer to 50%.
Right.
Versus, what we could see in the earlier. So that was a December end data. I think we have booked a good amount of profit in some of the small and mid caps because जहाँ पे valuations are going out of comfort zone, I think it is important that within at least those small cap names, because small caps also come with some higher amount of risk. Risk लग रहा है, so it is important that we've made good money. We don't want to get into that greed mode and continue to hold on. I think we would like to book profits and we look for better opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities in the market.
So I think at this point, we have also been at the call for more than an hour. Kunal, thanks for your time. If you have any concluding thoughts with which you want to, summarize it. happy to hear. But otherwise, yeah, I think we can subsequently close. Yeah.
So I think, I see one question where basically the participant is asking regarding the stocks not owned, where I showed that slide,
Right.
stocks not owned and performing well, but not shown stocks like, IRFC, RVNL, Jindal Steel, many more that we lagged somewhere. So I think the response is that के stocks तो सब चलेंगे, अभी सब stocks portfolio में तो होंगे नहीं, ले भी नहीं सकते हैं। पॉइंट इज तो जिंदाल स्टील वगैरह वो तो है। आप अगर हमारे भी स्टॉक्स देखेंगे पोर्टफोलियो में जो रिटर्न दिए हैं, बीट रामकृष्णा फॉर्जिंग और पीएफसी, पीएफसी भी हमने 125 रुपए में लेके 400 रुपए में बेचा या 300 रुपए में बेचा, दैट इज मेड गुड रिटर्न। यू आर सीइंग द स्टॉक्स नाउ। I think at an aggregate level, you have to see what risk you want to play. Jindal Steel is already part of the portfolio. If you can see the fact sheet, and Jindal Steel अच्छा रिटर्न दिया है और अच्छा एक्सपोजर भी है हमारे पास। और एट अ एग्रीगेट लेवल हमें वो देखना है जो ओवरऑल पोर्टफोलियो रिटर्न तो दिखा रहा है आपको कि जो हमारा परफॉर्मेंस है। आप इंडिविजुअल स्टॉक्स बताएंगे विच हैव डन वेल, बट आई थिंक नॉट दैट वी कैन ओन those stocks, all
Capital
of
is
those,
always limited.
because there are many multi baggers in the portfolio that we have been able to identify, we have been able to play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, Kunal, if I'm not wrong, जो table आपने दिखाया था, it was more in comparison to the benchmark as to how the stocks have been in the
हाँ
benchmark, and maybe these some
हाँ
of these.
एक और दो क्वेश्चंस है आई थिंक
Sure.
इन टर्म्स ऑफ वैल्यू फंड, हाउ मच परसेंटेज शुड बी इन द पोर्टफोलियो।
Right.
So I think, and is it the right time to go for a value fund? I certainly think that you can still participate in the value fund because it gives a good flexi cap. It has a flexi cap kind of approach, as well as flexi as well as multi cap kind of approach, and it has that some incremental amount of defensiveness. And still, I think value as a theme is not over. It will continue, and which is why I think time also it's right. Not necessarily may have missed something, but I think still can continue. And over a cycle, I think what is important is that you have to look at a rolling return, not just look at last 1 year return and hence invest. You have to look at overall 3 year return. I think I've been managing since last 15 months. I think you've known, I showed you the framework in terms of कैसे invest करना है हमें, वो discipline रखेंगे, and I think that is what we would our endeavor will be. So you should look at on a rolling 3 year basis is a better way to evaluate. Okay, not sure. There is one more question. How to decide from which stocks to do profit booking and rebalance the portfolio in the value fund scheme? So I think, two things I look at in terms of portfolio rebalancing या booking profit. One is that एब्सोल्यूट वैल्यूएशन देखते हैं कि फेयर वैल्यू से कितना ऊपर है, नीचे है, फेयर वैल्यू पे है। सेकंड इज दैट के गवर्नेंस एंगल या मैनेजमेंट अपडेट, या इफ देयर इज एनीथिंग नेगेटिव। सो आई थिंक अगर कुछ नेगेटिव आता है बिजनेस में, अपॉर्चुनिटी में, और वो उसको इवेल्युएट करना है कि वो टेम्पररी है कि परमानेंट है डैमेज। अगर सपोज वो डैमेज टेम्पररी है और स्टॉक गिरता है, I think that is one of the fantastic opportunities to buy more exposure into that stock rather than actually selling that off. I think काफी टाइम हमने देखा है कि वो पैनिक में आके इन्वेस्टर्स बेचते हैं, फंड मैनेजर काफी जाते हैं, मतलब स्टॉक्स हैव दोस पैनिक रिएक्शंस, बट दैट इज एग्जैक्टली आई डू दैट एज अ कॉन्ट्रा। तो जब भी लास्ट ईयर अप्रैल में इन्फोसिस गिरा था, और तो हमने पूरा साल हमने ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वी बिल्ड दैट एक्सपोजर at 1250, 1300, 1350, all of those levels we've built exposure. And that is a time where there was a big amount of selling that was happening, right? So I think use that opportunities. Profit booking, I think when it goes outside comfort zone. Uh, Second, what I do is also that पूरा एक साथ नहीं बेच देते. I do sell part so that at least from a because market है, tomorrow the stocks still continues to go up, still continues to re-rate. So I think to participate in that re-rating, I would not sell everything at first instance itself. So I think, that is what the style is, and that is what has worked. In Digital India, you could see that, some of the small cap, mid cap picks, they have worked fantastic. Some of the large cap picks, because that's a larger, longer term track record of, holding that fund, managing that fund, almost 8 years, 9 years. And there we have shown and proved consistently, been able to deliver and beat the benchmark, on a consistent basis, and even the peer average. So I think that I continue to, deliberate to deliver in pure value also. Yeah. So yeah, overseas exposure currently only to US market, or even to European, Southeast Asian markets. Yes, we want to keep overseas exposure only to the US market as of now, because those are, and only to the large cap companies. बिकॉज क्या है कि हम वहाँ पे जाके रिसर्च तो नहीं कर पाते, वट एवर वी रिलाई ऑन सम ऑफ द ग्लोबल global research houses to do, and plus some amount of research that we can do from here over here. With that, we take the call. So I think, which is why, we have to keep that risk in mind also, and hence we are doing investment only in the US and in large caps. How much percentage of funds should be allocated in IT funds to diversify? So I think 15-20% is a good number, because what happens is that IT sector ना वो स्ट्रक्चरल सेक्टर है. हमें काफी टाइम ना लोगों ने राइट ऑफ कर दिया है सेक्टर को. 2000 के बाद बोला कि ये तो Y2K का स्टोरी था, खत्म हो गया सेक्टर. 2008 में वापस बोला कि ये बैंकिंग, जहां पे जब Merrill Lynch bankruptcy happened, Lehman Brothers bankruptcy happened, Wells Fargo, a lot of these banks were under pressure, and that was a financial crisis. फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर वो आईटी के लिए 40% रेवेन्यू होता था तभी, एंड विच इज वाई तभी भी राइट ऑफ कर लिया, बोला कि बट नन ऑफ द सिंगल क्लाइंट वाज लॉस्ट. सो हमने ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, इन एवरी डिसरप्शन, वी हैव सीन दैट इंडियन आईटी हैज कम आउट ओनली स्ट्रॉन्गर इन द क्राइसिस पीरियड एंड गेन मोर मार्केट शेयर. आज की तारीख में देयर आर 50 लाख पीपल हु वर्क इन द इंडियन आईटी इंडस्ट्री. जे जनरेट $200 billion of export revenues. That is a humongous number, and you just understand that the kind of ripple effect it has on the economy. A lot of spending that happens, real estate gets boomed, consumer discretionary. So IT is a structural sector. Plus दूसरा बता दूं कि ये $200 billion IT सेक्टर का रेवेन्यू जो है, एक्सपोर्ट रेवेन्यू, द addressable market is $1.5 trillion. So we are just 15% of the addressable market. Maybe from a volume perspective, we would be higher, around 25%, but still the headroom to grow is still very large. So IT sector is a structural sector, plus the wage differentials, cost differentials of an Indian engineer versus a US engineer is also continues to be very big difference to attract business, which is why a lot of MNCs are setting up their captives also in India कि Indian engineers सस्ते में मिलते हैं, अच्छा काम करते हैं, हम अपना ट्रांसफर करेंगे काम फ्रॉम ग्लोबल लोकेशंस टू हियर, बिकॉज कॉस्ट सेविंग्स होता है. So I think we've seen those are the structural drivers for the sector, and which I think should continue. Over the next 2 years, what will also happen is that in this technology fund, you will see more domestic technology oriented companies. So आज की तारीख में, it's only few of the names, like, be it a Zomato, Nykaa, Paytm, MapMy India, वो सब कंपनीज है. बट आई थिंक और बड़ी बड़ी कंपनीज भी लिस्टिंग के आएंगी. आई थिंक यू विल सी दैट एक्सपोजर ऑल्सो गोइंग. Anything else, if I may have missed, I think you can get in touch with your respective RMs. Happy to address that. I hope this sector, digital sector related discussion, as well as pure value discussion, was helpful. Happy to address other questions if any. Yes.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Kunal, for joining in, and wish all the people who are there on the call a very happy Republic Day. And thanks a lot for joining again. Have a great weekend ahead.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.